This legislation also includes an important provision added in conference that I want to talk about. It requires all American intelligence agencies and those under contract or subcontract with intelligence agencies to comply with the U.S. Army Field Manual on Interrogations. Some find fault with that. I want to speak to that. Mr. Speaker, every member here believes that our nation must take decisive action to detect, disrupt, and yes, eliminate terrorists who have no compunction about planning and participating in the mass killings of innocent men and women and children in an effort to advance their twisted aims. No one on this floor should gainsay that that is not the objective of every member of this body. We can and we will act to prevail in the war on terror. However, in the pursuit of those who seek to harm us, we must not sacrifice the very ideals that distinguish us from those who preach death and destruction. Yet under the current administration, we have seen that line blurred between legitimate sanctioned interrogation tactics and torture. And there is no doubt our international reputation has suffered and been stained as a result. Who said that? That's a quote, but who said that essentially? Secretary Colin Powell, former four-star Army General, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Secretary of State in this administration. The excesses at Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo are well known, as are the administration's belief that the Geneva Convention against torture is, and I quote, quaint. And the Vice President's persistent effort to undermine the ban on torture, championed by whom? Senator John McCain of Arizona, Republican candidate for president. Just last week, we learned that the Central Intelligence Agency destroyed, perhaps illegally, videotapes of interrogations conducted by American agents. These incidents, unfortunately, sully our great nation's well-deserved good reputation. They raise questions about our commitments to human rights and the rule of law, and they allow our enemies to foment fear and stoke hatred. This provision requires all intelligence agencies to comply with the Army Field Manual on Interrogations. It is an attempt by this Congress to repair the damage that has already been done. Furthermore, the techniques permitted by the Army Field Manual have been endorsed by a wide array of civilian and military officials as both effective and consistent with our international commitments, and very importantly, with the safety of our members of the armed forces. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask unanimous consent to include in the record at this time a letter. The letter is signed by, and I will not take the time to read all of the generals, but there are four-star generals. A four-star general is as high as you can go in the force of the United States, except when we're in a world war, in which we accord a 5-star. There are many lieutenant generals, admirals, vice admirals, brigadier generals, major generals, all of whom are concerned about defeating terrorism. And this is what they say. As retired military leaders of the U.S. Armed Forces, we write to express on December 12, 2007, just a few days ago, we write to express our strong support for Section 327 of the Conference Report on the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2008. And then this paragraph. And I ask all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to listen to this paragraph from those who have worn the uniform of the United States of America, who have themselves, before they became generals, fought in the battles that America has sent them to, have fought for the freedom of this country and confronted the terrorists of their day and today. Hear this paragraph from those who have been at war and who want to protect their troops, our troops, American men and women. They say this: we believe it is vital to the safety of our men and women in uniform and the United States not sanction the use of interrogation methods it would find unacceptable if inflicted by the enemy against captured Americans. That is the critical point. We are a nation that believes in the premise of doing unto others what we would have them do to us. Our enemies do not accept that premise. Our enemies do not accept that value. Our enemies are different than we are. We must not become what we confront. The techniques permitted by the Army Field Manual, as I say, are endorsed by all of these generals. General Krulak, in particular, wrote a very compelling op-ed piece on this issue in the Washington Post. General Krulak is probably known as one of the toughest commandants the Marine Corps has ever had. I served with him on the Board of Visitors at the United States Naval Academy. He's as tough as they come. And he says, protect our people. Adopt this section. Here, in fact, is what General David Petraeus wrote to members of the armed forces in Iraq in May, just a few months ago. Quote, General Petraeus, four-star general, heading our effort to confront supposedly terrorism, and I believe terrorism, in Iraq. Some may argue, he says, that we would be more effective if we sanctioned torture or other expedient methods to obtain information from the enemy. They would be wrong. Beyond the basic fact that such actions are illegal, Petraeus' words, General Petraeus' words, history shows, he went on to say, that they also are frequently neither useful nor necessary. General Petraeus continued, quote, certainly, extreme physical action can make someone talk. However, what the individual says may be of questionable value. Our experience, he says, in applying interrogation standards laid out in the Army Field Manual shows that the techniques in the manual work effectively and humanely in eliciting information from detainees. This is General Petraeus, who wants to keep his troops safe and wants to prevent terrorist attacks on his people under his command. Inexplicably, the administration has issued a veto threat on this conference report because it would require all intelligence agencies to abide by the Army Field Manual. I believe that the administration's position is indefensible. This is not a question of whether we must combat and defeat terrorists. Of course, we must. However, we must never let it be said that when this generation of Americans was forced to confront evil, that we succumbed to the tactics of the tyrant, that we stooped to the depths of the dictator. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, not for party, but for country, not for partisanship, but for a reverence for the constitutional oath we took. I urge us all, let's demonstrate our commitment to the values that make us Americans. Let's begin to repair and restore this nation's reputation. Let's adopt this conference report. I thank the chairman for the time. I thank him for his leadership. I thank Mr. Hoekstra as well.